everybody, and welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. We have a great conversation coming up with the horror director Chelsea Stardust, and before we go, if you've been paying any attention to me on any parts of the internet, you will not be surprised to hear that we are going to address the season 1 finale of Yellowjackets, so stick around for that. But the less time I spend talking to you about that, the more time I have to tell you about my co-host for this episode, Chelsea Stardust. She is the director of both Satanic Panic and Blumhouse's Into the Dark installment, All That We Destroy, which you can find on Hulu. Chelsea Stardust is an expert in horror, and it kind of goes without saying because of those titles I just told you, but also I cannot stress it to you enough that Chelsea watches movies at like a greater consumption rate than anybody maybe I know, and she keeps a little notebook that she takes notes and thoughts down into. So this is a woman who knows what she's talking about. She is a brain trust of horror information. Welcome to the show, Chelsea. Is there anything else we need to know about you before we get into the conversation?
That is perfect. Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here.
Well, then tell the folks at home, I guess, what movie and what character have you brought to us to discuss today on the pod?
Yes. So I have brought to you the 1988 Tim Burton classic, Beetlejuice. And when I first saw that movie, I was a teenager, was probably like 12 or 13, and I fell in love with Lydia Deetz. So that's where it begins.
Well, Lydia Deetz is definitely one of our millennial icons.
Yes.
I mean, she is a formative figure. I feel like if there was any little girl that was going to grow up into shopping at Hot Topic at the nearest mall in middle school, they at one point or another, they were either like a Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas or like a Lydia Deetz goth at one point or another.
100% accurate.
Did you have like the sock sleeves of Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas? Were you a Hot Topic shopper?
Oh, fuck yeah. I was a Hot Topic shopper. Oh my God. I still on my keyring have the little card for a frequent shopper. You know, you get the Hot Topic card and they send me emails with coupons, and I still shop there at Christmas for people. So
amazing.
Yes, I still go to Hot Topic. And Nightmare Before Christmas was, I thought I saw Beetlejuice before that, but of course I loved Nightmare Before Christmas and had the CD and all of that. But Lydia specifically, I had part of her wardrobe I owned. And so I immediately I saw her and I was like, oh my God, is that me? I think that's me.
The little, I would imagine almost white-haired blonde child.
Oh, yes.
In Ohio that you were, big blue eyes, just there's me, Lydia Deetz.
Totally, because I was I wanted to dye my hair. I was not allowed until I was much older. And but and there were just so many similarities between us within the movie that I immediately connected with her. So, and Beetlejuice is of course it is great gateway horror as well.
Absolutely.
So it helped shape my love for the genre as well. And I grew up very, very young, grew up on Pee-wee. So,
same.
Yeah. So the music, it's obviously Danny Elfman. So the way the movie starts, it's immediately taking you into this world with this sort of slightly carnival-esque theme to it. And because I recognized the music and had loved Pee-wee, I was already set up to love Tim Burton in general. So I was set up to love the movie, and obviously can quote it, and I have it on vinyl and all sorts of. I had a shirt from Hot Topic that said Beetlejuice, and it was one of those baby tees. So it was teeny, tiny little shirt.
Tiniest shirt.
That I've since passed on to my friends' children because I can't even get my arm in it anymore. I held on to it for a really long time though. And I'm I could probably just buy another Beetlejuice shirt because there are hundreds.
Right. Yeah. We're not lacking for merchandise here. Now, describe for us Beetlejuice. What is Beetlejuice about?
Okay, so if there's anyone out there who has not seen this movie, you need to right that wrong. fucking immediately. I believe it's on
pause,
it's on Hulu.
Pause us right now. Go listen. It is available on Hulu.
Yeah. So Beetlejuice is about the Maitlands, which is Barbara and Adam Maitland, which is Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis. And they live in this farmhouse and it's very cute. And so they go into town and they get their supplies and a dog runs out in the middle of the street and they swerve to avoid the dog. Car goes into river. And then you see them coming into the house. They're soaking wet, talking about, oh my God, that accident was crazy, blah, blah, blah.
I'll make some coffee and you get some wood for the fire.
Well, maybe we should just take things extra slow. Do you remember how we got back up here?
And then it's revealed that they find out that they are dead.
You know what? I don't think we survived the crash.
And then like it's amazing how much time we spend in this movie without meeting the Deetzes. Like I had forgotten kind of as I was rewatching this, being like, oh, we get a fair amount of time with the Maitlands in the house and coming to terms with their death before the Deetzes get there. Totally. And then the rest of this movie begins.
So we don't, I actually wrote down, we meet Lydia 14 minutes into the movie.
She has her signature wide-brimmed circular black hat.
What do you think, honey?
Delia hates it. I could live here.
With just the all black and of course carrying a camera attached to the camera as her insufferable stepmom, Delia, played by Catherine O'Hara, is just barking orders at the movers.
Careful, that's my sculpture. And I don't mean mine and I bought it. I mean, I made it. It's my sculpture.
And her dad, who is like in real estate development, I feel like as near as we can tell, he has left New York City. They have moved to Connecticut to the country for him to relax. He just wants to relax.
I'm here to relax and clip coupons. And damn it, I mean to do it.
And all Delia wants to do is rip up this house, remake it in her image. And Lydia's like, I like it here. It's probably haunted. We should just leave everything the same.
And it's important to note that Lydia can actually sees them in the window. And then Barbara's like, I think that little girl can see us. I think she can see us. But they're like, we want to get these people out of our house. We want our house back.
Yeah, they want to haunt the Deetzes out of the house.
Yes.
And that is, I mean, and once they realize they're very bad at being ghosts. And so against the advice of counsel of their caseworker, they turn to the very compelling and charismatic in his own way, Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice, for assistance in bioexorcism.
No, we just want to get some people out of our house.
I understand. Well, look, in order to do that, I'm really going to have to get to know you guys. You know, we got to get closer, move in with you for a while, get to be real pals. You know what I'm saying? Save that guy for later, huh?
My wife and I would like to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure. Go ahead, shoot.
Well, for instance, what are your qualifications?
Well, I attended Juilliard. I'm a graduate of the Harvard Business School. I travel quite extensively. I lived through the Black Plague, and I had a pretty good time during that. I've seen The Exorcist about 167 times, and it keeps getting funnier every single time I see it. Not to mention the fact that you're talking to a dead guy. Now, what do you think?
He specializes in terrorizing the living, and they make the devil's bargain to bring him on to purge the home. And over the course of it, build a relationship, though, with Lydia. And it becomes the question of, like, can these ghosts live with these people, or is it only an either or? Must they boot them out of the house according to like the ghost rules? And once they bring Beetlejuice on board, can they purge him from the home before he just terrorizes absolutely everyone into oblivion?
Also, there's other interactions with Beetlejuice, obviously, like our title character Michael Keaton, who's like incredible in this role, and it's he has some of the most amazing lines of dialogue. He is totally like a disgusting creature, and is just the worst and the best. Like,
yes, the absolute worst and the best. This is a virtuoso performance of Michael Keaton. We really don't talk enough about how good he is.
Yeah, I think people kind of forget about this. I know it sounds crazy, but it's like everyone tends to always think about Batman, and so I think people kind of forget. And he's just so great in this performance. And I remember I met the first real movie set I was ever on when I moved out to LA and was an assistant. He was in the movie, so I got to meet him, and all I wanted to do was talk about Beetlejuice. And I was like,
I'm sure.
you gotta keep it under control. And I ended up, he went to high school with one of my really close friends' mothers. So I talked to him about that. That was like this. I was like, hey, weird coincidence. I think my friend's mom went to school with you.
That's a great
like,
lead-in.
Oh my God, how is she? Blah, blah, blah. I have never met this woman, but I acted like I knew everything about her.
Of course you did. Yeah.
And
you can answer all of Michael Keaton's questions about this woman.
Yeah. And he was so wonderful and just such a great, like, down-to-earth dude, and was very approachable. But I was losing my shit about it.
For our purposes here, for the you and Lydia of it all, what was the moment in her character? What something she did, something she said, a way she reacted, where you were like, oh my God, there I am. Like, oh shit, there's something more going on here that is resonating so specifically for me amidst all the other things that I'm enjoying, where I am connecting with this character in a kind of extraordinary way. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that it's actually kind of sort of like chronological throughout the movie. So I grew up in a very rural area in the Midwest and in a farmhouse. So she ends up moving into, I've lived there my whole life. They are clearly coming from the city, coming from somewhere else. However, she is an only child. I am an only child. Her stepmother is an artist and a sculptor. My mother is a sculptor. My mom does really weird stuff that literally looks like it could be in a Tim Burton movie. So when I saw Delia's sculptures, I was like, that's like what my mom does. I remember being like very puzzled and being like, that's interesting. Obviously, her like fashion sense, I've always been like goth adjacent. And I've always, my parents were like, wear whatever you want. They were like, they never like really censored my clothes. So I had
your parents were like, your parents were the Maitlands kind of.
Yeah.
From what like they were kind of they were sort of the parents that Lydia was hoping to have.
Totally. They were kind of like, they're more the Maitlands, but with these aspects that like Delia has, and so, so I was allowed to wear like, fishnets and big combat boots and plaid mini skirts and black shirts and with safety pins on them. And, I definitely like was wearing black nail polish and lipstick and all that stuff. But also when you first meet Lydia, she has a camera. I always was running around with either my dad's video camera or a Polaroid camera or my dad, like a old school film camera before digital cameras. So I had one and I was always taking pictures around the property, around the farm. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, she takes pictures too. That's so cool. She saw the spider and the spider web and was like, I could live here. And I was like, I can relate to that. Like, I'm totally into that. But I remember she like at one point she says, my whole life is a dark room.
Yeah, because Charles promises to build her a dark room in the basement when they get the house all set up. And she explains to him,
my whole life is a dark room. One big dark room.
Yeah, and I was also like a very like, I'm a Pisces. I'm very emotional. I was going to say, dramatic.
were you a moody child in the way that Lydia is a moody child?
I was a dramatic child. So I was definitely very dramatic. I was very emo child. So I could very much relate to that. Like I was reading Sylvia Plath when I was in late middle school or early high school. So like I remember reading The Bell Jar and I was like, this book has changed my life, So and also she references Night of the Living Dead. And that's one of my favorite movies. And I had seen that movie, I think, before I had seen Beetlejuice. And I was like, oh my God, she's talking about Night of the Living Dead. I love Night of the Living Dead. So it was like little things like that. And of course, her iconic line, which is what I lived by, is I myself am strange and unusual.
Well, I read through that handbook for the recently deceased. It says, live people ignore the strange and unusual. I myself am strange and unusual.
And when she said that line, I was like, oh, there's someone else who also feels strange and unusual so that must be okay. And my
Now
parents
that is-
always encouraged me to be strange and unusual. And I am totally like weird stuff and stuff. And also like my parents always like very much encouraged that. So that line, I myself am strange and unusual, is like, it was the first time where I was like, oh, this is someone else who is like me, and it's okay for me to be like that.
Well, and that is, I mean, that line really gets to the heart of the character. And I think the heart of the conversation, which is like, how were you the strange and unusual child? Like, what was the strange and unusual about you that you were looking at in a Lydia Deetz and being like, finding in her a permission to be, you were supported, but finding in her a further permission to be that strange and unusual you? Like, what was that?
Yeah. So after like, I was sort of, growing up in the middle of nowhere, the daughter of artists. So because both my parents are artists, and they, we would go to all these art shows, and they also loved Tim Burton. My dad like went to college with David Lynch. So I was seeing David Lynch kind of a lot, and I was really loving, and they showed me all sorts of cinema, a lot of experimental cinema, and all sorts of really wild and crazy art, a lot of modern art too. And, so that's something I just like automatically gravitated towards and really liked. But then when I would go to talk to my peers about it, they would be like, what are you talking about? Or certain books I was reading. What is that? Like, oh no, I'm not reading that. Or music I was listening to. Like, not only was I listening to like a lot of rock and like Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, but I was also listening to like Eric Satie and like classical stuff. Like, but Eric Satie is like kind of like sad sort of music.
Yeah.
And a lot of Simon and Garfunkel and things like that. And they're like, oh, we're going to the NSYNC concert. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm not listening to NSYNC. That must mean I'm like not cool. And I was like, it made me very self-conscious. And also I was, dressing a little bit differently. I was doing more of the like goth end of clothing, and everyone was doing the more like wearing the Adidas, looking like Limp Bizkit kind of sort of thing.
Oh God, yeah. At the time they sure were.
Yeah. And that just, I was like, oh, that's not really, and I felt like I was expressing myself through my clothes and my apparel. It was kind of like about control. And I was like, oh, that's something I can have control over. And it just had such a huge impact on me. And it also helped me because Lydia is so like knows who she is, and she's so sure of herself, but she's also, you see her growth in the movie too. And so that is something that I really was curious about and was really interested in. And I was like, oh, well, she knows who she is, and like, but it is also open to change, and how other people, like these friendships affect her life, like with Barbara and Adam. And, that's something I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And it was like very inspiring to me. And it helped me not be, I guess, scared of that and to be open to that.
Well, and did you then at the time when you see this person who is so sort of like settled in themselves as their identity, was that something where you saw like, I see that as an aspirational thing because that's what I strive to be? Or did you see that as something that you identified with because you too felt that sort of sense of certainty, but there was like, I don't know why other people aren't vibing with this. So was it, were you the secure in yourself, or were you more the searching type at that age?
I think I was pretty secure in myself, but because I was really like horribly bullied too. And I was like, oh, there must be something, the way a lot of people reacted. Maybe there's something wrong with me.
The Lydia-ness of you, like those kinds of signifiers, were those the kind of things you caught shit for?
Yeah. That I was just different and weird. And, and because I would talk about the things I love and like wouldn't hide them, then people are like, oh, you like that? Like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, oh, does this mean I have to like change who I am? But when I saw her, I was like, well, she knows who she is and is confident in who she is. And I am too. And I shouldn't hide that. Like, I should be proud of that.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, but we've got so much more to get into with Chelsea Stardust. Still to come is my favorite part of the show. What does Chelsea see Lydia Deetz becoming after the movie? My vote? Pansexual witch. Stay with us.
For over a decade, Max FunCon has been an incredible weekend of learning, connecting, and laughing with folks in the Max Fun community. And, if all goes according to plan, the last regularly scheduled Max FunCon will take place in Lake Arrowhead from June 3rd to June 5th, 2022. We have a very limited number of tickets remaining. To make them available to the maximum number of people, we'll be opening our waitlist for tickets on January 23rd at 5 p.m. Pacific. That'll be your chance to be first in line to purchase tickets, and we'll go down the waitlist until we're at capacity. More details at maxfuncon.com. And mark your calendars for Sunday, January 23rd at 5 p.m. Pacific.
I'm John Moe. My show Depresh Mode is all about mental health. And this week, I talk with Amanda Knox. She spent 4 years in an Italian prison for a murder she didn't commit. That's a lot of trauma, and she's okay talking about it. If I touch on something that you'd rather not get into, just say so. We'll cut the whole exchange out, but it also seems like you're pretty open about a lot of things.
Yeah. I am having trouble imagining anything that you could talk to me about that
I know. What are we going to throw Amanda Knox with? Depresh Mode with John Moe, only on Maximum Fun.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm your host, Jordan Crucchiola. Like I said before, I'm talking with the horror director, Chelsea Stardust. She is the filmmaker behind the horror comedy Satanic Panic, as well as All That We Destroy, an installment in Hulu's Into the Dark series, also from Blumhouse. The character that makes her feel seen? Lydia Deetz from the 1988 classic Beetlejuice. We are going to talk about impact. And this is as you have gone on to become a genre filmmaker, Chelsea, and you were saying that, like, you know, the sort of horror roots in you. Lydia is part of that antecedent. She is part of that origin story of it sounds like, of the career you have today. So how did Lydia Deetz contribute to sort of like that artistic identity that shaped you?
Yeah. So I think when I saw that movie, because I knew I wanted to make movies at like a very, very young age or be involved in them in some way. And as I made it, it started with, I think it actually started with Lydia, because when you asked me about this podcast, I was like really thinking about really early on who, I saw myself in. And because there's also other characters that I would see little facets of myself in. But it wasn't, but I was like, in terms of like the most things in common that I connected with, it was Lydia. And it also made me start to think, I would look for that when I would watch other movies and of other characters I could connect with or relate to. Cause I was like, it started to make me aware of representation. And as I was watching movies, I was like, well, if there's a character in a film that I connect with and I see myself in, then it must be that way for someone else too. Yeah. And so it's like, I'm not utterly alone in that sense. Yeah. So I kind of kept it in the back of my head where I was thinking about that with character representation, both in movies I watch and then in things I made, and to make sure, even if it was the slightest thing, that that certain characters were infused with something of me in them. And so that's because I was like, well, if this movie connects with me on that level, then there's another young woman out there that could connect with this character in this film, or this moment in this film with this character, or whatever it may be. But that was the first time I was ever like really aware of that transition as a viewer than to a creator.
Well, and tell me about the Tim Burton of it as well. And like you being a young person, like obviously, again, the interest in horror, like what is something like this for you as like a little child, like baby creative who's going to come into like this filmmaking career? Like there's so much watching the movies that we grew up on that were like adult movies that like had the whimsy and the fantastic that like allegedly appealed to children, but were like dark, fucked up. Like the movie, like Tim Burton movies we grew up on, and movies like The Dark Crystal and The Secret of NIMH, like really heavy material for children. What is watching something with this level of kind of fantastic do for you? Like there's infinite possibility. It feels like when you're watching those early Tim Burton movies for what you could see or experience.
And yeah, so Tim Burton specifically was such an inspiration to me as a creative and a filmmaker. And again, it came from Pee-wee, both the TV show, but then when he did the movie, which was his first movie. And I also, I'm the kid that loved the dark Disney. Like I like the Sleeping Beauty. I like the Snow White. I like Black Cauldron. With seeing Pee-wee and seeing Beetlejuice. Also, you watch those movies now as an adult, and I was like, oh my God, there is so many things in this I never caught as a kid.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm like, whoa. Especially like Beetlejuice is like so inappropriate. And I was like,
so
wow, this
inappropriate.
went right over my head as a kid.
Lewd and inappropriate.
So gross. And but I think so with Tim Burton's work specifically, and that's also, and I grew up loving, like I said, I love John Waters. I like these, again, it's an example of a director who knows exactly who they are and what they want. Like they're, when you see a Tim Burton movie, it's a Tim Burton movie, and they're a little left to center. They totally embrace they basically take all sort of this weird, very weird left of center, unusual stuff. And they kind of he's bringing it into a mainstream, and even like looking at, I loved Edward Scissorhands growing up as well. And it's sort of like kind of giving, not that you need permission, but giving you permission to be like, yeah, it's okay to like this. Like you're not the only one who likes this. There are other people that like this. And then when you find out when you connect with other people on those movies, like, oh, do you like that movie? Oh, I like that movie too. This person and I might have a same kind of aesthetic. And then that sort of becomes this like sense of community in, oh, you love this kind of movie. I love this kind of movie. And I haven't really, the next movie I'm hoping to direct, Tim Burton is actually a huge inspiration for the writer in terms of the world that he's creating with the script. And so when we met to talk about it, he's like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be a heightened reality a la Edward Scissorhands, a la Beetlejuice, a la, where it seems like, oh, this is taking Americana and turning it up to an 11 kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. And so I heard that and I was like, oh my God, this is my chance to like do my Tim Burton homage, is like hopefully in this next thing I do. And I even pay homage to Beetlejuice there's a movie I did when I was in a short film I did when I was in like 11th or 12th grade. And I made it a faux documentary called Spinal Shatter, which is off of Spinal Tap.
Cool, yeah.
And if you didn't catch that. And then, and I had two friends dress up like Lydia and Beetlejuice, and I interviewed them. I did this faux interview, and I took characters from all sorts of movies, and then I had clips from those movies. I've rewatched it recently. It does not make any sense whatsoever. But I thought about this because I was like, oh my God, Beetlejuice. I'm even doing stuff with Beetlejuice in high school, like for a English, it was for an English project. And I would do trivia. And I don't even know how I found that trivia out because, well, no, I think IMDb did exist at that time. But I was talking about like the Deetz' name and that it was connected to Eileen Deetz from The Exorcist. And I was throwing in all of these like little weird tidbits of information. But it even started to infuse into my work, like as a, future creative then. And of course I saw, in all of his production design, all of that, all the incredible production design he did, I saw like my parents' work in that too.
Yeah,
so I just felt connected to Tim Burton.
I want to talk to you about like the sort of evolution of your relationship with this character. And I think this is she's such an interesting character to have this conversation about because we get that really tidy line. The I myself am strange and unusual. And, when we grow up feeling strange, that's not necessarily something that goes away entirely. Like if you kind of feel like you're a bit of the odd duckling in the bunch, like you grow into yourself, of course, but like I feel like that sort of fundamental strangeness can kind of hang around for a long time. We just learn to embrace and celebrate that. So yes. What is your relationship with your strange and unusual over the course of like growing with this character and revisiting it?
Yeah, well, definitely still feel strange and unusual, but I have a tribe of strange and unusual. I have a coven of strange and unusual people in my life. So, and then seeing this film, like watching it now as an adult, it's sort of like looking back at, because I see now I watch it and there's so much of like things with Barbara I'm relating to too, but it's looking back on like you're sort of reflecting on your young self. And I was like, part of me is like, Lydia is like looking at my younger self and being like, God, I wish I could have told, like, I wish I would have I didn't quite have all the confidence that Lydia had when I was younger. And I was like, man, I wish I could have told that my younger self, like when I was watching this, like, because of this character embracing who she is, this will help me later in life. And that it's like, it's going to be okay. And there were still times when I was like nervous to be strange and unusual, or to speak, even coming down to like speaking my mind, which Lydia like is very vocal about the stuff she thinks and about, you know, when she doesn't like something, and it's like standing up for something when she doesn't like what her parents or Other's doing or whatever. Yeah. And also her parents' relationship with her, it's so funny because Delia is so dramatic. And so like 2 and 11. And then to see like Barbara and Adam like completely embrace her for who she is. And that's, I was very lucky that my parents were like that as well. But looking back, I have a very like nostalgic feeling now when I watch, because it's like, oh my God, I see so much of myself in her. I was like, man, I'll watch it and be like, should have studied this more. I should have thought about this more. Like, I think I got to the same conclusion, but do you know when you might have started hitting that inflection point where you were like at a certain age or had taken in sort of enough media and influences or what have you, or like developed in yourself enough? Do you know around when you could start recognizing like the 30,000 foot point of view on this character where it's like, oh, wow, that was a big deal for me? Like, where in sort of your movie viewing life did it start becoming available to you to be like being able to process and like have the language to process that kind of look back ability, that like being able to view it as something nostalgic and like, man, if older Lydia Deetz me could have gone to little me, like when did that, when that started happening in your life? That was probably like maybe somewhere in probably more recently than I'd like to admit, probably like late 20s, maybe. In college though, like I think I was more, because I could start over. There was one person I went to high school with that went to my college, or one or two people that went to my college, but it was so big that I like rarely, and I was friends with them, but rarely saw them. But I could really start over again. So, and I could really fully embrace who I was and not hide who I was or try to like change something to impress somebody else because of their attitude about something. Like if I didn't like something, I could speak up about it, and that opinion would be respected. And so I think it was then where I kind of fully embraced who I was and had the confidence to do that as well. Now, so what I'm curious, when you got to college and you had that, like, what did start fresh look like for you then? What was that like? All right, now I am in control of this and there's no baggage behind it. So what did that look like when you were like let loose compared to like maybe in high school? Yeah. Well, I had sex, which is something I hadn't gotten to do in high school. Right. Okay. Yeah. So, full transparency to, like, as soon as I could, like as quickly as possible. I remember my best friend and I talking about how we couldn't wait to go to college to get laid. So you were in a teen movie. You were in a teen movie then. Or, it was like, by the end of first semester, we're gonna do it, man. Yeah. Well, I guess it was right after I graduated high school, actually. Like the summer after was like my first like big romance. But, it just like in high school, it just like was not happening because I think I was just too fucking weird or something. And of course, it's so funny that people like you go to high school with, they come out of the woodwork and like years and years later, like a decade later, they're like, oh, I had such a big crush on you. And I was like, yeah, no, they really do. Multiple people. And I was like, yeah, that's great. It doesn't do me any good now, but thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thanks for not giving me the opportunity at the time. Yeah, I'm flattered. But I also I finally was able to cut my hair. My parents kind of loosened up a little bit on that. Like I got to cut my hair. I got contacts. I got my braces off like right as I was graduating high school. And that kind of like changed everything. And then in college, I could wear
so you were
whatever
like,
I
oh,
want.
I got hot.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. But well, people like didn't recognize me.
You could like confidently, like, not that not everybody is beautiful, but like you could believe in the visage before you and be like, okay, hot me has arrived. Like,
yeah.
I know it now. I believe it now. I'm in it now.
Totally. I cut my hair, put like a lot more blonde in it. I colored it. I got my braces off and I got contacts all like right the day before I graduated. And so I showed up for graduation and people did not recognize me. People legit, they did they're like, Chelsea. And I was like, yeah, motherfuckers.
That's nut. That is what a way to go out. Oh my God.
But also like in college I could, because in high school you still have like, there are some limitations into wardrobe, but college I could wear whatever the fuck I want. And I also wasn't, there were other people that were dressed similar to me and other people that I was like, oh yeah, that's my person. And that's my person. And I really let loose. And I was really had a lot of fun. I had so much fun in college. But I was also it was kind of like I came out, that's when I fully came out of the cocoon. And I feel like I fully had my confidence then. And I wasn't obviously wasn't being bullied anymore. And, exposed to all sorts of new people, and the film program was incredibly diverse. And so it was just like, it was really an incredible time for me. And that also, and I was confident in myself, but it took me a minute to get that confidence, and I fully came out of the cocoon. And I just owe a lot of that to Lydia, and had never thought about really that impact until, years later.
Well, now then I'll play the fun game with you that we like to play here on the show, which is that like imagining the future of Lydia Deetz. And like, I have already expressed, I think she has girlfriends. I think she has boyfriends. I think Lydia Deetz is a pansexual witch. And I think that's what her life's going to be about. What is your advanced timeline for Lydia? What path is she walking?
Well, pitching her as a pansexual witch, which basically makes her who I am now. So how fabulous that is, that I am her grown up now. So it's so funny because I with this game, I was just thinking, like, before we started, I jotted down really quick the things that I thought on instinct without overthinking it. Just like, okay, boom, what would it be? Yeah. So she is queer. She's a vegan.
You're so yeah, you're right, definitely.
She wouldn't dissect that frog, so that's like starting out
that's
vegan,
a great point,
which is great. I think she is the what basically, if I wasn't directing movies or racing sled dogs, I would probably be in a librarian trying to give like R.L. Stine and books to like, and Sylvia Plath and all these things to young people. So I was like, librarian, probably writes her own self-published cozy mysteries. She
definitely self-publishes fiction. Oh, completely.
She totally does. Has a farm with many animals. Like, she's got the goats, she's got the sheep, she's got all that I think she's would still stay in her. She wants to be close to Adam and Barbara. So still,
I was going to say, do we think she's like around the house? Do we think she's in the house? Like, cause I see her as wanting to stick with Barbara and Adam.
I think that the house, her parents, they have an agreement. The house gets left to her. And it becomes her home. And within the home, she has a dark room. She's still doing her photographs. Yes. They're in the town coffee shop. Like, people see her work. And does the farming and gardening and takes care of these animals. She probably has bees and sells honey. Like, she's doing all the things, but is still doing all her photographs, is still leading her strange and unusual life, and making sure the kids coming to the local library are cultured and are taking out all the books they should be reading, and is spreading sort of her dark magic through literature and through movies.
I completely see her as like Like, and like in a story where you have like a kooky witch aunt, like that's Lydia. She's good. She's good Aunt Lydia. Like she is like the aunts to Sabrina the Teenage Witch kind of thing. Like just living in like loose cloak like clothing at as often as possible. And yeah, I like the apiary. I think that's completely happening. I think she didn't compromise, and I think she lived the life that she wanted to.
She doesn't compromise and she doesn't apologize.
Yeah.
We should all be so lucky.
That is a lovely story for Lydia Deetz. I'm really happy about that. Now, is there anything else you would like to say to mention before we sign off?
Man, I think I literally covered all the things I could think of about her. And I just like, again, want to say like, I'm so thankful that a character like her exists and existed for me. And at the age I saw her was so important for me because of it. It started giving me the confidence of like, of to be accepting and loving myself and who I am. And I'll like forever be thankful for that. And I don't think I even really appreciated it until much later in life. But yeah, just, no apologies. She's a badass.
Well, thank you so much for bringing Lydia Deetz to our door. I love saying the name Lydia Deetz for bringing Lydia Deetz to our doorstep today, Chelsea, to talk about it and for taking the time to share with us about her.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Always a dream doing a podcast with you. So thank you. And I got to talk about a movie and a character that I haven't gotten to talk about before. So that was really cool. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Considering how steeped we all are as urban mid-30 somethings in and around media and how many podcasts that means we have done, I think that is a tremendous feat.
Yes. Thank you so much.
That was Chelsea Stardust, folks. If you haven't seen her films yet, please do go check them out. And then before we end today, the one quick thing before I go is the thing that has been sitting on top of my heart and pressing down on it since Sunday, which is the finale of the show Yellowjackets in season 1. I have talked about it before on this show because I love it so much. And the season finale, episode 10, was my favorite episode of the season. And it really delivered on the building tension between our two teen leads, Sophie Nalise's Shauna and Ella Purnell's Jackie. They finally had the BFF confrontation we've been waiting for. And I am not the first person to say this. I'm not the only person to say this, but I will say it again. I so cherish the way this show, and when anything, film or television, treats teen girl interpersonal drama with the gravity that it deserves. It is so often happens historically that entertainment, that content for teen girls is dismissed as, oh, it's just something for girls. Like it's a niche interest, like we're not half the fucking population. And this show gives the gravitas to a fight, a cataclysmic fight between two best friends that kind of like, if you watch it, life and death implications that you emotionally feel like when you're in the throes of that moment. You feel so afraid to go to your best friend with the truth of something, even if it's bothering you, because you're afraid the world as you know it will end. And this show, and thanks to the horror construction that it is delivered through, we get the opportunity to experience those, lashes that Jackie and Shauna throw at each other as these physically wounding apocalypse level blows. And I really respect the show for doing that. And I also, to the point of the mysteries of the show, whatever theories you have, whether you are on team infanticide, whether you are on team ghosts in the woods, whatever your crazy speculation about Yellowjackets is, I'm going to say, and I was talking to friend of the pod, Emily Vanderwerf, about this, I hope in a lot of these mysteries that we just never know the answers. I don't want to know. I don't want to need to know what the symbol means. It's because it's not really about that. So like, you know, I support the Reddit contingent of fandoms where they are spinning up all possibilities, narrative possibilities of where the show could go. But I, for one, they can take me wherever they want. I just want to be surrounded by high stakes girl drama and see one of the most incredible Murderers Row casts of actresses, Christina Ricci, Juliette Lewis, Melanie Linsky, Tawny Cypress in the adult timeline. I'm riding this out on the strength of their relationships and their conflicts with one another. Mysteries, whatever. Bring it on. Bring me the horror. But I'm rooting for you, ladies. I'm rooting for you, girls. I'm rooting for you, non-binary, incredible actors that you have on this show. Queer cast, queer content, queer storylines. It's got it all. So now is your time. You can get that little trial subscription and you can binge that whole show in a weekend. So join the Blood Hive. We're waiting for you, and I'm going to need somebody to keep talking to me about this stuff for the next however long until the show comes back. So come on, Blood Hive, let's go. And that's our show. You can follow us on Twitter at Feeling Seen Pod or join our Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/feelingseenpod. You can also send us an email at feelingseen@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me online, I'm Jorcru on Twitter. That's JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. And I want to welcome our new producer, Marissa Flaxbart. Hi, Marissa. Thank you for your service. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher. And this is a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned.
Audience supported.